It's happening. 26 years after their first appearance and 7 years since the last time we saw them together. Finally, the X-Men are entering the MCU. Excitement is high, confusion is even higher, and as the Doomsday clock starts ticking, this might be the perfect moment to go back to where it all began. I'm M. Hussein, this is Visions, and now let's go back in time. Oh, this might sting a little. Years before the superhero boom and before Nolan redefined the genre and before the rise of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there were the X-Men. In 2000, we stepped inside Xavier's school for gifted youngsters for the very first time. A different world, different heroes, a story ahead of its time. And now with Wolverine returning alongside Deadpool, this is no longer just a film series, it's become the longest running superhero movie universe in cinematic history. But to truly understand it, we need to break it down. The X-Men universe can be divided into 3 main eras, and the first one is the original timeline, the classic X-Men era. And this is where it all began. In X-Men, we are introduced to a world living in fear of something it doesn't understand: mutants. The story is told through Wolverine, a man with no memory drifting from one fight to another, until he meets Rogue, a young mutant who can't touch anyone without hurting them. Together, they find their way to Professor X and his school, a place meant to protect mutants, and prepare them for a world that fears them. On the other side stands Magneto, who believes that humans will never accept mutants. His plan is simple and terrifying. Use a machine to force world leaders to become mutants, starting with a global summit. In X2, X-Men United, that war escalates. After an attempted assassination on the president by a brainwashed mutant, humans strike back. Led by Colonel Stryker, a man with a personal hatred for mutants, the government launches an attack on Xavier's school. Students are forced to flee, alliances shift, and for the first time, the X-Men and Magneto are forced to work together. But Stryker's plan goes deeper. Using Professor X's powers, he intends to locate every mutant on Earth and eliminate them all at once. Then comes X-Men, The Last Stand. The conflict reaches its breaking point. A pharmaceutical company develops what they call a cure for mutation, a choice or a threat. For some mutants, it represents hope. For others, it's an act of erasure. Magneto sees it as a declaration of war. He gathers an army and marches on the facility producing the cure. Meanwhile, a much more personal story unfolds. Jean Grey returns, but not as she was. The Phoenix has awakened, unstable, uncontrollable, and far beyond anyone's power. The second timeline, the prequel era. It begins with X-Men First Class, set in the 1960s during the height of the Cold War. We meet a young Charles Xavier, brilliant, optimistic, still believing that mutants and humans can coexist, and a young Eric Lenser shaped by trauma, driven by revenge, hunting the man who destroyed his childhood. That man is Sebastian Shaw, a mutant manipulating global events, pushing the United States and the Soviet Union toward nuclear war, not for power, but for evolution. Because in a nuclear world, mutants would rise, humans would fall. Charles and Eric come together to stop him. They build the first version of the X-Men. X-Men Days of Future Past, a future where everything has gone wrong. Mutants are nearly extinct, hunted by sentinels, machines that adapt, evolve, and cannot be stopped. This future wasn't an accident. It started with one moment: the assassination of a scientist decades earlier. So they make a final decision: send Wolverine back to 1973, not to fight, but to prevent that one event from ever happening. In the past, everything is different. Charles is broken, Magneto is imprisoned, and the X-Men don't exist anymore. Logan has to rebuild what was lost, convince Charles to believe again, convince Eric to trust even for a moment, and stop Mystique from making a choice that would define the future. The timeline is rewritten, and the future is saved, but not restored, replaced. A new reality, where the past no longer leads to the same outcome. And that brings us to X-Men Apocalypse, the 1980s, a new world, a new generation of X-Men, but also an ancient threat. Apocalypse, the first mutant, awakened after thousands of years, believing the world has grown weak, corrupt, and ready to be cleansed. He gathers followers, enhances them, turns them into his horsemen, including Magneto once again. Then comes Dark Phoenix, a story that becomes more personal than ever. Set in the 1990s, the X-Men are no longer hiding, they are heroes, trusted, respected, working with governments. But that trust comes at a cost. During a rescue mission in space, Jean Grey is exposed to a cosmic force, something beyond control, beyond understanding. It doesn't just give her power, it amplifies everything inside her, her pain, her anger, her past. As Jean begins to lose control, the truth about her childhood is revealed. Memories that were suppressed, choices that were hidden, including decisions made by Charles himself. What was meant to protect her becomes the reason she breaks. The team fractures, alliances collapse, and she stands alone, not as a hero, not as a villain, but as something in between. The new timeline and spin-off. That's include Wolverine trilogy. It starts with X-Men Origins Wolverine, an origin story that focuses on Logan's past, his relationship with Sabretooth, his time in war, and the experiment that turns him into Weapon X. By the end, he loses his memory, setting up the version of Wolverine we meet in the original X-Men film. Then, the Wolverine, set after The Last Stand. Logan is dealing with guilt and isolation. He travels to Japan where he's offered a chance to become mortal. That offer leads to a conflict where he temporarily loses his healing ability. For the first time, he can be injured and stay injured. And the arc complete with Logan. This is where everything pays off. Set in 2029, mutants are nearly gone. Logan is older, his healing factor is failing. His body is breaking down. He's no longer a dominant force. He's surviving. He takes care of an aging Professor X whose uncontrolled powers make him a danger to everyone around him. Then Laura X-23 enters the story. A child created from Logan's DNA, raised as a weapon. The plot is simple. Get her to safety. But the execution is what makes the film stand out. There are no large-scale battles, no world-ending stakes, everything is personal. Logan is widely considered one of the best comic book films ever made. By the end, Logan doesn't just complete a trilogy, he completes an arc that started nearly 2 decades earlier, and for the first time, the character gets a definitive ending. The Deadpool movies. A separate tone within the same universe. Less structured, more self-aware. It starts with Deadpool, an origin story for Wade Wilson, a mercenary diagnosed with cancer who undergoes an experimental procedure to survive. He gains accelerated healing, but is left physically disfigured. The film focuses on revenge and establishes the character's fourth wall-breaking style. Deadpool 2, a larger sequel with a more emotional core. After a personal loss, Wade becomes involved in protecting a young mutant, Russell Collins Firefist. The story introduces Cable, a time-traveling soldier trying to prevent a future tragedy. The film expands the world but keeps the same tone. Then comes Deadpool and Wolverine, the most important shift for the character and for the franchise. For the first time, Deadpool is directly integrated into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not as a reference, not as a joke, but as an active part of that world. The film pairs Deadpool with Wolverine, two characters with completely different tones, the other grounded and serious. The story revolves around a multiverse-level threat that puts entire timelines at risk. Deadpool is pulled into a mission to fix a broken reality and prevent certain worlds from being erased completely. To do that, he's forced to work with a version of Wolverine from a different timeline, a version shaped by different choices and a different outcome. And together they move across timelines, confronting forces connected to the collapse of these realities, trying to complete the mission, while barely functioning as a team. Unlike the previous films, the focus here is not just on Deadpool, it's on transition from the X-Men universe into the MCU. This makes the film more than just a sequel. And finally, The New Mutants, a film that feels completely isolated from everything that came before it. Set inside a locked facility, far away from Xavier's school, and even further away from the world of heroes and villains we've followed for years. 5 young mutants, each one carrying trauma. They are told they're patients, that they're being treated, helped, guided toward control. But slowly, that narrative starts to collapse. Because this facility isn't a hospital, it's a containment unit, and what begins as therapy gradually reveals itself as something much more sinister. How to watch the X-Men universe. Because after everything, there are 2 ways to experience it: release order, the way it was originally presented, with all its contradictions, retcons, and evolving tone, or timeline order, a more structured way to see how events should connect in universe, and honestly, I prefer the first one. The X-Men are now officially entering the Marvel Universe in Avengers Doomsday. But how? Will these be the same versions we followed for years, coming from one of the existing timeline, either the original or the one reshaped after X-Men Days of Future Past? Or will Marvel introduce completely new version from a different universe altogether? So which version do you want to see? Share your thoughts in the comments, and as always, see you soon.